Why was the helicopter shaking so violently, or was it her hands? The US-60 Blackhawk jolted again, its frame groaning under the strain as it banked hard over the jungle canopy. Humid air slammed through the open doors, carrying the smell of rain, fuel, and adrenaline. Inside the vibrating cargo bay, Staff Sergeant Josie Flores sat wedged between two gear crates, helmet chin-strapped tight, eyes focused but distant. She'd done this countless times before: insertions, extractions, operations that lived in the quiet shadows of official reports. But something about this flight felt different. Maybe it was the weight of silence from the others. Maybe it was the static crackling in her headset. Or maybe it was that hollow place in her chest that had started growing somewhere between her first deployment and now, the one she kept pretending wasn't there. She ran her gloved fingers across her HK-416, feeling every groove, every bit of metal she'd memorized long ago. The rifle was her constant, loyal, predictable, unflinching. People could fail, orders could blur, but a well-kept weapon never lied. 90 seconds. The crew chief's shout cut through the rotor thunder, hand signals slicing the air. Josie adjusted her night vision goggles and glanced toward the door where the fast rope hung coiled and waiting. Below them, endless jungle, a green sea of secrets, broken only by the shimmer of a river snaking through the canopy. Somewhere down there, a man was running for his life, a CIA officer carrying intelligence that could shift an entire war. Simple mission, the briefing had said. Fast rope in. Locate operative, retrieve intel, extract before dark. 5 operators, 70 kilometers of enemy-controlled jungle. 4 hours of daylight. Simple on paper. Suicide in reality. Josie's pulse matched the helicopter's vibrations. She wasn't afraid of dying. Not anymore. What she feared, quietly, privately, was surviving again and wondering if any of it ever changed anything. 30 seconds. The words snapped her back. She looked to her team. Master Sergeant Alex Rivera, their leader, calm even as the helicopter rocked like a storm-tossed ship. He met her eyes and gave a short nod. No words, just understanding. On the other side sat Tech Lawson, comms specialist, double-checking his encrypted receiver. Maria Santos, weapons expert, face half hidden under her helmet, and Jason "Doc" Williams, combat medic, his gloved fingers absently tapping the medical kit strapped to his chest. 5 souls about to drop into hell. The helicopter flared nose up, rotors screaming. The clearing below was barely large enough for a landing, maybe 20 yards across, surrounded by jungle so dense it looked solid. Go, go, go. Josie didn't hesitate. She gripped the rope and stepped into open air. For one brief, suspended heartbeat, gravity disappeared, only the sound of rushing wind, only the weight of her gear and the roar in her ears. Then she dropped, boots skimming through mist until impact. She hit the ground in a crouch, rifle already up, scanning east. 3 seconds later, Rivera landed beside her, then Santos, then Lawson, then Doc. The Blackhawk climbed away, its noise swallowed by the jungle, and silence crashed down, that thick, suffocating kind that only comes after machines leave, and you realize how alone you are. Rally Point Alpha, Rivera's low voice came through comms. Standard dispersion, Flores on point. Santos, rear security, move. Josie's boots sank into the mud with the first step. The air was heavy, wet, clinging to her skin beneath the uniform. The jungle didn't want them here, she could feel it. It wasn't just terrain. It was a living, breathing organism that devoured anything careless enough to linger. She raised her rifle, moving through foliage that slapped her shoulders like a warning. Her team followed in perfect formation, 7 meters apart, each covering overlapping sectors. Every motion silent, practiced, drilled into muscle memory. Her HK-416 was light in her hands, a natural extension of her body. It had never failed her. It wouldn't now. Tech status on our package, Rivera whispered. Lawson glanced at his receiver. Signals active, northeast, 1.8 kilometers, stationary for the last half hour. That could mean hiding, Santos murmured. Or captured, Josie added quietly. We won't know until we get eyes on. They moved deeper, the ground turning to muck beneath layers of rotting leaves. Roots snared their boots. Mosquitoes whined near their ears. Every breath felt like inhaling through cloth. But Josie's mind was locked, focused on the rhythm of movement, the soft crunch of steps, the muted chirp of unseen insects. Then she stopped. Hold, she whispered, fist up. Instantly, everyone froze. Ahead, a scrap of tan fabric fluttered from a low branch. She crouched, eyes narrowing. Civilian cloth, torn, stained dark. Possible evidence 15 meters ahead, she murmured. Flores Santos, check it out, Rivera ordered. They advanced in silence, rifles sweeping arcs through the undergrowth. When Josie reached the fabric, she recognized it immediately, a piece of khaki shirt, torn and blood-streaked. Fresh, Santos said softly, no weathering. Small amount of blood. Whoever wore it's hurt but still moving, Josie added. The vegetation around them told the rest of the story, snapped twigs, scuffed mud, faint boot prints. Western tread. He's running scared, Josie whispered. Fast, not careful about noise discipline. Then we move faster, Rivera's voice came through. They pressed on. The jungle thickened. Overhead, the canopy filtered what little sunlight remained into muted green gloom. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became, no birds, no wind, just the sound of their own breathing. Something shifted in the air, that primal, invisible sense that said you're being watched. Then Santos' whisper, movement, 7 o'clock, 60 meters. Josie pivoted, rifle up, eyes slicing through the foliage. There a figure barely visible, olive-drab uniform, a K-pattern rifle, moving low, scanning the ground. I've got him, she breathed. Single hostile patrol pattern. Don't engage unless compromised, Rivera ordered. She tracked the man through her optic, finger hovering over the trigger. One shot and he'd never even hear it. But restraint was part of the job. She steadied her breathing as the insurgent passed within 50 meters, close enough to see the scar across his jaw. Then he disappeared behind the trees. Clear, Santos confirmed. Where there's one patrol, Doc began. There's more, Rivera finished. Flores move, increase pace. Josie pushed forward. The trail became erratic, deeper footprints, more blood, broken branches. The operative was moving blind, wounded, desperate. Tech signal update. 300 meters, still stationary. The static in her comms mixed with her heartbeat. Something about that signal being stationary, too long, too quiet, felt wrong. Then the faint echo of voices, multiple ahead, speaking the local dialect. Contact front, Josie whispered. 75 meters, 6 to 8 individuals. Concealment positions. Now, Rivera ordered. The team vanished into the jungle, ghosts melting into shadows. Josie slid behind the root of a massive tree, rifle up, eyes steady. Through narrow gaps in the leaves, she saw them, insurgents. 8, maybe more. They were relaxed but alert, gathered around a small clearing, and at the center, a man. Tied to a tree, hands bound, face swollen and bloodied, khaki shirt torn, stained. Josie's stomach tightened. Visual on the operative, she murmured. Captured, interrogated. Rivera's breath crackled in her earpiece. Weapons. Mix of AKs, SKS, 1 PKM machine gun. Well equipped. Lawson checked his tablet. That's him, Daniel Kramer, CIA officer. In the laptop. Near his feet, Josie said, looks intact. Rivera was silent, running the math in his head. 8 enemies, 1 heavy gun, 5 operators, surprise on their side. We're not leaving him, Rivera said finally. We hit them hard, fast, surgical. Assignments came quick, professional. Santos took the PKM gunner. Josie, the one giving orders, likely the leader. They positioned themselves, hearts steady, breaths measured. "Stand by," Rivera whispered. 3, 2, 1, execute. The jungle exploded. Josie's HK-416 barked twice. 2 rounds center mass. The insurgent leader dropped before his weapon cleared his shoulder. A split second later, Santos' bullet punched through the PKM gunner's skull. Rivera and Lawson unleashed controlled bursts into the center. The first 5 seconds were chaos, shouts, flashes, muzzle flares lighting the trees. Doc was already moving, sprinting toward the captive, knife flashing to cut bonds. An insurgent swung his rifle toward them. Josie fired once. He fell backward, dead before his brain understood he'd been shot. "Package secured," Williams shouted. "He's alive." "Rally point Bravo," Rivera ordered, "bound back." Josie moved first, sprinting low through mud and smoke, rifle up, breath ragged. Behind her, Rivera's voice guided the rhythm: move, cover, like a deadly dance they'd practiced 100 times. Gunfire cracked behind them, the jungle alive with noise and fury. Josie's boot slipped on a root. She caught herself, swung around, sighted, fired 1, 2, another threat down. Her magazine clicked empty. She reloaded on instinct, the motion automatic, rehearsed 1,000 times in darkness. "Contact left," Lawson shouted. "Flanking. Engage." They turned the fight sideways, controlled bursts pinning enemy movement. But for every one they dropped, more appeared, drawn by the noise. Josie's breathing turned shallow. This wasn't a fight anymore, it was survival. "We're burning ammo," Santos warned. "Rally point Charlie," Rivera called. "Bound, maximum speed." They moved, firing, retreating, firing again. The ground blurred. The jungle swallowed brass and bodies alike. A rocket screamed overhead, RPG. The explosion ripped the air behind them, shockwaves slamming through Josie's chest. She hit the ground, ears ringing. "Everyone good?" Rivera shouted. One by one, voices answered, shaken but alive. They kept moving. There was no other choice. Somewhere behind them, engines roared, vehicles, fast, closing in. "Radio intercepts confirm they're blocking our extraction," Lawson said breathlessly. "Then we change the plan," Rivera replied. "We go northeast to the river." Josie's muscles screamed. Her shoulder throbbed from shrapnel, but she kept moving. You didn't stop, not until it was over. And as they broke through the tree line, the sight hit her like salvation, a wide brown river, glinting under fading light. "Rally point Delta," Rivera ordered. "Set perimeter, call the bird." They took positions, weapons up, eyes scanning the jungle that had tried to swallow them whole. Josie crouched behind a fallen tree, finger tight on the trigger. 70 minutes, Lawson said, then extraction. 70 minutes in hell. The first crack of gunfire echoed across the river. Josie steadied her rifle, exhaled slowly, and whispered to herself, not as a soldier, but as someone still human underneath the armor. "Just hold." And when the next shot came, she was ready. The first shot cracked through the trees like a whip, distant at first, then closer. Another answered it, and another, until the sound of automatic fire rolled through the jungle in waves. Josie's instincts took over before thought could form. She flattened against the damp earth, rifle already angled toward the sound. Her pulse slowed, paradoxically steady in chaos, a strange calm she'd never been able to explain. Some people called it training. For her, it was survival's second nature, that quiet place she could slip into where fear had no voice. "Contact west," she whispered into comms. "Confirmed," Rivera's voice replied, tight but composed. 12 hostiles minimum. They're moving tactically." Santos answered with a short burst of gunfire. "They know we're here." Leaves shredded above Josie's head, bullets ripping through the foliage like hornets. She rolled sideways, found a new angle, returned fire. Her HK-416 bucked against her shoulder, a familiar rhythm. Controlled bursts. 2, maybe 3 rounds at a time, each one placed deliberate. A figure appeared between the trees, barely visible muzzle flash betraying him. Josie exhaled, squeezed. The insurgent collapsed before the echo faded. RPG, Santos yelled. Josie's world erupted, a thunderous explosion behind them, showering dirt and splinters. The concussive wave slammed her against the log she used as cover. Ears ringing, vision swimming, she blinked hard and checked herself. Her left arm burned where shrapnel had grazed her sleeve. No blood, just heat and shock. "Suppress that RPG team," Rivera barked. Josie spotted them, 2 silhouettes crouched behind a downed tree 70 meters out. Long shot through vegetation, but she'd taken worse. She steadied her breathing, crosshairs dancing with the tremor in her arm. 1 heartbeat, 2, squeeze. The loader dropped. Another second. The gunner panicked, turned, another shot. Down. "RPG team neutralized," she reported. "Copy," Rivera said. "Santos shift fire, boats incoming." "Boats?" Josie pivoted, saw them, 2 fast-moving skiffs cutting through the brown water, each with mounted machine guns. Their engines screamed against the silence between bursts of gunfire. Santos opened up first, her round stitched across the lead boat's bow. The pilot jerked, slumped, and the vessel spun sideways, slamming into the muddy bank. The second kept coming. "Cover fire," Rivera shouted. Josie and Lawson joined in, rounds churning the air around the approaching craft. But then its gunner found range, heavy caliber fire tore through the trees, splintering trunks, chewing through the jungle like a living thing. "Down, stay low." Rivera's voice was nearly drowned by the roar. Josie pressed herself into the dirt. The ground shook with impacts. Wood chips and soil rained down. She wanted to breathe but couldn't, lungs locked between fear and fury. This was supposed to be a rescue. Now it felt like a siege. William's voice broke through. Kramer's hit again, shoulder wound reopened. "I've got him stable for now, but he can't move fast." They were running out of time, ammunition and distance. "Rivera, we can't hold like this," Santos said. "They're regrouping on both flanks." "Negative, we hold until extraction." Josie could hear the conviction in his voice, the kind that came from command, but also from something deeper, a refusal to quit, to break. She admired it, even as she questioned if it would get them killed. The second boat roared closer, machine gun hammering nonstop. Josie saw the flash of the gunner's face, young, maybe 20, eyes wild. She didn't hesitate. Her reticle found him mid-burst. 1 round, clean. The heavy gun went silent and the boat veered out of control, slamming into the riverbank. For a moment, only the jungle's wounded silence remained, thick, uneasy, trembling. Then Rivera's voice, "Status." "All good," Santos called. "Comms holding," Lawson added. "Air support ETA 40 minutes. Josie glanced down at her magazine, half empty. 2 more left on her rig. 60 rounds total, not enough for what she saw coming. She switched positions, crawling to a better angle. The forest smelled like burnt powder and wet earth, a mix she'd come to associate with survival. Through the scope she saw movement, shadows between trees, coordinated. The enemy was reorganizing, coming again. "They're learning," she muttered. "They always do," Rivera said, crouching beside her. His face was streaked with sweat and grime, eyes bright with exhaustion and focus. "We just learn faster." He gave her a short nod, that wordless encouragement that said, "You're doing fine, keep it together." A burst of fire interrupted them. Lawson shouted, "They're flanking right." "Josie, cover north." She swung her rifle, sighted, and saw them. 3 insurgents moving low through the underbrush, trying to circle behind. "Got them," she whispered. Her shots were clean. First dropped instantly. Second stumbled, clutching his leg. The third fired blindly toward her flash. Bark exploded inches from her head. She ducked, heart hammering. Fear wasn't something she admitted to, not out loud. But right then, it was there. Not the kind that paralyzes, the kind that sharpens you, strips you down to instinct and breath. Doc's voice came again. Kramer's losing blood. We need medevac priority. Negative until the bird's here, Rivera replied. The next 15 minutes were an eternity. The firefight ebbed and surged. Sometimes a lull so deep Josie could hear her own heartbeat, then another burst, more shouting in the distance, more rounds cracking through leaves. Her shoulders screamed every time she raised the rifle. Sweat burned the cut. She ignored it. Then silence. Too sudden, too complete. Rivera noticed it too. Eyes up, something's off. Even the birds were quiet. Josie's finger tightened on the trigger. Every instinct screamed. The explosion came from the left, not a gunshot, a grenade. It ripped through the air, scattering mud and fire. Josie hit the ground hard, helmet slamming against a root. Her ears rang, a high, piercing tone that replaced every sound. Through it, she saw Rivera on one knee, blood streaking his forearm. Santos was yelling something she couldn't hear, pulling Doc back behind cover with one hand while firing with the other. Josie blinked hard, disoriented. Her rifle lay just out of reach. Another grenade landed close, too close. She crawled, fingers scraping the mud. The blast hit before she reached it. The world went white, then black, then a nauseating gray. When her vision cleared, she was still alive somehow. Rivera's voice came faint through static. Flores, report. She grabbed her radio, coughed. I'm up, minor concussion. Good, regroup on me. We're pulling Kramer back to the waterline. They're pushing hard. Josie stumbled toward the river. Her boots felt heavy, her hearing muffled, but training pushed her legs forward. She found Rivera crouched beside Kramer, Williams wrapping a quick bandage around the CIA officer's arm. Kramer looked half-conscious, eyes glassy. Did you get the laptop?" he rasped. Lawson lifted the pack slung across his back. Right here. Then don't die for me, Kramer muttered. Rivera looked at him, then at Josie. Too late for that option. More gunfire erupted, closer now, relentless. They're committing everything, Santos warned. At least 20 closing in. ETA on bird, Rivera barked. 20 minutes, Lawson answered, checking his tablet. 20 minutes, Josie repeated quietly, like saying it could make it shorter. Her last magazine clicked in. 30 rounds, that was it. She sighted downrange silhouettes moving between trees, flashes of rifles. Her shots came rhythmically. One fell, another ducked, a third stumbled into the river, lost in the current. Then the distinct roar of jet engines split the sky. Josie's heart leapt. Lawson's voice was sharp in comms. Cobra 111, this is ground team. We are danger close, requesting immediate air support. IR strobe active. A voice replied through static, smooth, calm American. Copy that, ground team. We have your strobe. Confirm hostiles west of position. Affirmative, bring the rain. Danger close confirmed. Keep your heads down. Josie pressed into the dirt, face buried in mud. Then the world erupted. The Fa-18 screamed overhead, unleashing its cannon. The sound was apocalyptic, a ripping roar that turned trees to splinters and earth to craters. The air filled with dust, smoke, and the smell of cordite. Enemy fire stopped instantly, then screams, then silence. Josie lifted her head, blinking through haze. The jungle west of them was shredded, a nightmare landscape of smoke and torn ground. The voice crackled again. Cobra 111, Winchester on ordnance, holding pattern for show of force. Copy, Lawson said. You just saved our lives. Roger that, ground team. Stay safe. The radio went quiet. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the river and the distant whine of the jets circling above. Rivera exhaled long and slow. Sound off. All green, Santos said. Alive, Williams added. Kramer's stable. Josie lowered her rifle. Her hands trembled, adrenaline burning out of her system like poison. She looked at her empty magazine, then at the jungle. What remained wasn't victory. It was survival, ugly, raw, necessary. Rivera's voice came again, quieter now. ETA on extract. 15 minutes. 15 more minutes in a war zone. 15 minutes for more ghosts to appear. Josie sat with her back against the fallen tree, eyes unfocused. The smell of burnt soil hung heavy. Her shoulder throbbed. Somewhere deep in her chest, that hollow ache grew again, the one she carried from mission to mission. She looked at the sky, gray, thick with smoke, and thought how beautiful peace must sound. Williams crouched beside her, checking the bandage on her arm. "You're lucky," he said. She gave a tired smile. "Luck got nothing to do with it." He paused, studying her face. "You ever think about stopping? About what happens when all this is over?" Josie looked at the rifle across her lap. "No," she said softly, "because it never is." The sound of distant rotors rose on the wind. The Black Hawk was coming. But as it neared, the jungle shifted again, movement in the tree line. More figures, more rifles glinting through smoke. They weren't done yet. Josie exhaled slowly, chambered her last round, and whispered maybe to herself, maybe to the ghosts waiting in the shadows. "Let's finish this." The distant thump of rotors cut through the humid air, rhythmic, mechanical, and almost too beautiful to believe. At first Josie thought it was her imagination, some mirage of hope conjured by exhaustion. But then the sound grew, unmistakable, the low growl of a blackhawk pushing through the haze. "Bird inbound," Lawson shouted, voice raw through comms. Rivera looked up, scanning the treetops. "That's our ride. Everyone prep for extract. Flores, Santos, maintain overwatch. We're not clear yet." Not clear, not even close. Josie shifted behind her log, scanning the tree line through the heat-tripled air. The jungle had gone quiet again, too quiet, just like before the last ambush. Her finger tightened against the trigger. The rotor noise swelled until the whole canopy trembled. The Blackhawk broke through the mist like a ghost, descending fast, nose angled toward the river. Spray kicked up from the brown water as it hovered 20 feet above the bank, side doors open, door gunner already scanning for threats. Josie could see the crew chief waving them in, shouting something lost in the roar. Then the first muzzle flash lit up the opposite tree line. "Contact southeast," Santos yelled. The jungle erupted again. Bullets chewed into the dirt around them. The Blackhawk's minigun spun to life, spewing a torrent of fire that tore across the water like a chainsaw made of light. Josie fired in short, deliberate bursts, her last magazine half spent within seconds. The insurgents were closing in fast, emboldened by desperation. She could see them darting between trees, shadows, and the smoke, wild but organized. "Move Kramer first," Rivera ordered. Williams and Lawson grabbed the CIA officer under his arms, half carrying him through the mud toward the hovering helicopter. Kramer was barely conscious, his head lolling, blood streaking his jaw. The Blackhawk dropped lower, skids kissing the mud. Josie covered their movement, firing until her weapon clicked dry. She slammed in her final magazine. Santos shouted over the comms, "I'm out after this." "Make it count," Rivera called back. They were down to their last rounds, every shot measured, sacred. The air was chaos, rotor wash, gunfire, smoke, screams. But in the middle of it, Josie felt that same strange calm. Her breath slowed. Her world narrowed to the sights of her rifle. An insurgent broke cover 20 meters away. Josie fired once. He dropped. Another appeared, yelling orders, 2 more shots. Silence. Her weapon's bolt locked back, empty. For a split second she just stared at it, the realization cutting deeper than the ringing in her ears. Empty, out, done. "Go, go, go," the crew chief screamed. "Flores, Santos, move." Rivera's command snapped her back. She grabbed her rifle anyway, even empty. It felt wrong to leave it behind, and sprinted for the helicopter. Santos was right behind her, smoke curling off her barrel. The last 10 meters felt like forever. The air shook with gunfire. Mud exploded at their feet. The door gunner's minigun spun up again, cutting down a whole line of attackers as Josie dove through the open door. Hands grabbed her vest and hauled her inside. She turned immediately, covering the open air with her weapon while Santos jumped in after her. "Last three," the crew chief shouted. Rivera, Lawson, and Williams were still outside, sprinting through the chaos. Rivera fired short, controlled bursts as he ran. Lawson covered the flank with his sidearm, his rifle empty. Doc had Kramer's pack slung over his shoulder, still moving despite blood streaking his temple. 50 feet, 30, 20. Then the jungle screamed again, another ambush from the rear. Rounds tore through the air, pinging off the Blackhawk's armor. One hit the door frame inches from Josie's face, spraying her with hot metal fragments. "Suppressing," she yelled, raising her rifle again despite the emptiness. The click of the dry trigger mocked her, but she stayed in position, pretending the rifle was still loaded, anything to keep the enemy's eyes on her instead of her team. The minigun opened up, the sound so loud it swallowed everything else. Trees vanished in a hail of bullets. Rivera reached the door first, dove in head first, rolled against the floor and shouted, "Go!" Lawson followed, then Doc. The instant the medic's boots cleared the door, the crew chief slammed the signal. The pilot pulled pitch, and the helicopter clawed skyward. Gunfire chased them as they rose, rounds cracking against the hull, but the Blackhawk climbed faster than the enemy could adjust. "Everyone sound off," Rivera ordered. "Flores good. Santos good. Lawson good. Williams good, Kramer stable." Rivera slumped against the wall, breathing hard. "Copy that." The helicopter banked west, engines straining as it gained altitude. Through the open door Josie watched the jungle recede, endless green swallowing the smoke and chaos below. They survived somehow. Her body finally registered the pain, the throbbing in her shoulder, the bruises from recoil, the aching burn of adrenaline crash. She leaned her head against the vibrating metal and closed her eyes. For a few seconds, she let herself breathe. Rivera's voice came again, softer now. "You dropped that RPG team clean, Flores. Saved Williams' life." She didn't open her eyes. "Just doing my job, Sergeant." "That's what makes it exceptional," he said quietly. The crew chief patched into command radio, relaying their condition. Team Alpha returning with one rescued CIA asset, moderate casualties, requesting medical on standby. "Copy that," came the reply through static. "Pad 1 is clear. Welcome home." Home. Josie almost laughed. Home wasn't a place anymore, just a brief pause between missions. A shower, a cot, maybe an hour of sleep before the next operation. She looked across the cabin. Santos sat opposite, helmet off, hair plastered with sweat, staring at nothing. Lawson was hunched over his gear, counting magazines he no longer had. Williams was pressing a field dressing against Kramer's arm, talking quietly to keep him conscious. Josie reached up and unclipped her helmet. Her hair stuck to her neck. She let the hot air rush over her face, stinging her eyes. The world outside was golden now, late-day light spilling over the treetops, indifferent to the war beneath. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the rhythmic whoop-whoop-whoop of rotors. Then Kramer's voice, faint but clear, "You shouldn't have come for me." Rivera looked at him. "We don't leave our own." "I'm not one of you," Kramer said. "You are today," Rivera replied. Josie opened her eyes and met Kramer's for the first time. He looked haunted, hollow, like a man who'd seen too much and remembered all of it. She understood that look. She saw it in the mirror sometimes. "You got the laptop?" he asked. Lawson tapped the sealed pack beside him. safe and sound. Kramer nodded weakly. Then maybe it was worth it. The helicopter descended toward the forward operating base. Concrete walls, sandbag towers, the dull geometry of survival carved into hostile land. Final approach, the crew chief called. The skids touched down with a jolt. Ground crew rushed forward, medics with stretchers waiting. As the door slid open, hot air and dust flooded in. Josie squinted against the sun. The base smelled of fuel, sweat, and safety, temporary, fragile but real. Rivera was the last to step out, offering his hand to Kramer as he was loaded onto a stretcher. "You'll be fine," he said. Kramer gave a faint smile. "You sound like you've done this before." Rivera's answer was simple: too many times. Josie followed them onto the tarmac, boots heavy with dried mud. The sound of the helicopter faded as it lifted off again, heading for refuel. Around her, the base pulsed with the rhythm of routine, mechanics shouting over engines, intel officers running with tablets, medics hauling supplies. Life in motion. She stripped her gloves off and flexed her hands. The skin beneath was pale, wrinkled from sweat. Her rifle hung empty at her side, barrel scorched and blackened. The armorer met her near the hangar, a big man with oil stains on his sleeves. "How many rounds?" "About 190, she said. "Lost count." "Malfunctions?" "None." He whistled softly. "Good weapon." Josie gave a small nod. "Best I've ever had." He took the rifle from her gently, as if it were something sacred. "I'll clean it, ready for your next dance tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" she asked. He smiled, not unkindly. "Always tomorrow." She walked toward the team room, fatigue settling deep in her bones. The others were already there, half stripped of gear, sitting in silence that needed no words. Santos was cleaning her sidearm. Lawson was checking his comms rig for shrapnel. Williams was rubbing the back of his neck, eyes distant. Rivera entered last. Still bleeding through a field dressing, he refused to let Doc replace until after debrief. "Med says Kramer's going to make it," Williams reported. "Couple broken ribs, concussion, but he'll live." "And the intel?" Rivera asked. "On its way to Langley." "Then mission success." No one cheered. No one smiled. They just nodded. Success in their world meant alive for another day. Rivera leaned against the wall. "We were supposed to find a man on the run. Instead, we found an ambush, 2 platoons, and a miracle. You all performed beyond expectation." Santos shrugged. "The airstrikes did the heavy lifting." Rivera shook his head. "The airstrikes finished what we started. They don't drop those bombs if we don't hold the line long enough to call them in." Josie said nothing. She just stared at her boots, mud-streaked, torn, the same pair she'd worn on every deployment. The room fell quiet again. Outside, the sun sank behind the perimeter walls, painting the sky in blood-orange light. Later in her quarters, Josie sat on the edge of her bunk, HK 416 laid out in front of her. She cleaned it piece by piece, a ritual, almost meditative. The smell of gun oil filled the air. Every scrape of the brush was a heartbeat. Every click of reassembly, a prayer she didn't know how to say. When she finished, the weapon gleamed under the dull light. Perfect, ready. Her phone buzzed, a message from Rivera. "Team meeting 800, pack for extended deployment." She stared at the words for a long moment, then typed her reply. "Roger, ready when needed." She set the phone aside, leaned back against the wall, and closed her eyes. The room hummed with the faint vibration of generators outside. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw the river again. The smoke, the faces. She thought of Kramer's words, "You shouldn't have come for me." Maybe he was right. Maybe none of it mattered in the long run. But it wasn't about mattering. It was about showing up when the world expected you to fail. About stepping off helicopters into the unknown again and again because someone had to. That was the quiet truth of soldiers like her. The world would never know their names, never read their stories. But sometimes the most powerful acts of dignity didn't shout. They simply did the job. The first sound was rain. Soft at first, then heavier, hammering against the tin roof of the barracks until it drowned everything else. The hum of the generator, the distant calls from the flight line, even her own thoughts. Josie lay awake long before reveille, staring at the dull metal above her bunk. Sleep hadn't come. It rarely did after missions like that. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes muzzle fire across green shadows, Kramer's blood on her gloves, the ripple of river water lit by explosions. You learn to live with it, or at least pretend to. The clock on the wall glowed 05:47. The meeting was in 13 minutes. She sat up slowly, wincing as her shoulder protested. The wound was shallow but deep enough to ache, a quiet reminder of how close she'd come. She flexed her fingers. No tremor, that was something. By the time she stepped outside, the rain had thinned to mist. The base smelled of wet concrete, jet fuel, and burned coffee. Dawn hid somewhere behind thick gray clouds. Inside the command tent, Rivera was already waiting, fresh bandage on his arm, a folder open on the table. Santos, Lawson, and Doc filtered in behind her, still looking half alive. No one spoke at first. The air in the tent was thick, not tension, just that post-battle silence that came when everyone was still processing what they'd survived. Rivera looked up, mourning. Lawson muttered, barely. Rivera gave a ghost of a smile. I'll make it quick, we're being retasked. Josie's eyebrows rose, already. He nodded. Hire wants us back in the field, 48-hour turnaround. They're short on assets in Sector 6. Sector 6, Santos frowned. That's mountains, different AO entirely. Different everything, Rivera confirmed. He tapped the folder. Intelligence believes an insurgent splinter cell, same network we just tangled with, has relocated there, possibly regrouping. Our job's recon only. Observe, confirm, report. No direct engagement unless compromised. Lawson chuckled dryly. Last time we had a no-engagement clause, I counted 40 bodies. Rivera's gaze hardened. We adapt to what we find, you know the drill. Josie stayed silent, watching the raindrops crawl down the plastic wall of the tent. Recon, observation, simple words that never stayed simple. Santos folded her arms. We're down to half ammo stock, still patching gear. We even have lift capability. Rivera nodded. Resupplies inbound from Bagram will be green by nightfall. The silence returned, heavier this time. Doc finally spoke, his voice low. And Kramer. He's on medevac to Germany, Rivera said. Alive. The laptop's already with Langley's cyber division. Apparently, it's bigger than we thought. Josie looked up. Bigger how? Rivera hesitated, rare for him. Rumor says the intel confirmed foreign funding routes for multiple insurgent networks. Operations like ours, rescues, extractions, might all trace back to the same paymasters. So the war not ending, Lawson said flatly. Rivera didn't answer. Outside, thunder rolled over the mountains like distant artillery. He closed the folder and looked around the table. We deploy at 2100, pack light, standard infiltration loadout. Josie, you're on lead again. She nodded, automatic, though her stomach tightened. The meeting broke up slowly. No one rushed. No one protested. You didn't in this line of work. You just kept moving. Josie lingered a moment longer, staring at the map pinned to the wall, jagged topography lines, coordinates, terrain names that blurred into meaninglessness. The kind of place where radio signals died and ghosts stayed loud. Rivera noticed, something on your mind. She shook her head, just wondering how long we can keep doing this. He paused, then said quietly, until we don't have to. She almost smiled. You really believe that? He didn't, but he nodded anyway. some days. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and electric. Josie sat outside the hangar, checking her rifle one more time. Clean, oiled, perfect. A small sparrow landed on the chain-link fence a few feet away, feathers puffed, head tilting curiously. She watched it for a while. It reminded her of home, the one she barely remembered. A desert town with dust storms and cheap coffee, and a mother who used to wait on the porch every time her daughter came back from another training cycle. She hadn't been back in 6 years. Santos walked up, helmet under her arm. "You ever think about quitting?" Josie smiled faintly. "You mean after this op or in general?" "In general." Josie looked out across the tarmac. The horizon glowed gold behind the clouds. "All the time," she said. "Then I remember there's always someone out there who won't make it home if we do." Santos nodded, silent. There were no speeches between them, just quiet understanding, that fragile bond of people who'd seen too much to believe in words anymore. The next night, they lifted off under darkness. The helicopter's interior glowed dim green under the instrument lights. Josie sat near the door again, helmet on, night vision ready. The rhythmic thump of the rotors was almost comforting now, like a heartbeat she trusted more than her own. Below them, the jungle gave way to mountains, jagged silhouettes under moonlight, ridges wrapped in mist. Lawson's voice broke through comms. "Signal check, all clear." Rivera gave a thumbs up. "Insertion in 5." Josie stared out into the night. The world below was a blur of darkness and cold. Somewhere down there waited another unknown, another mission wrapped in secrecy, another chance to get it wrong. She thought of Kramer again, the way he'd whispered, "You shouldn't have come for me." Maybe he'd been right. Maybe saving one man meant nothing if the machine behind it never stopped. But that wasn't her call. Her job was to go where others couldn't. The helicopter banked hard, rotors whining as it approached the landing zone, a narrow ridge flanked by sheer drops on either side. 2 minutes. Josie checked her harness, her weapon, her breathing. Her hand brushed against the charm tied to her vest, a small silver cross, tarnished and scratched. It wasn't faith, not really. It was memory, the only thing she carried from before. 30 seconds. The crew chief opened the door. Wind howled through the cabin. Cold mountain air bit through her gloves. Josie moved to the edge, scanning the darkness. "Then go." She dropped into the night. The rope burned against her palms as she slid the last few meters. Boots hit rock. Her knees bent, absorbing impact. Rifle up, scan left-right. The others followed, quick and silent. The helicopter rose away, its lights vanishing into the clouds. And just like that, they were alone again. The mountains were nothing like the jungle. Here the air was thin, sharp, cruel. The terrain was treacherous, loose rock, narrow ledges, sheer cliffs disappearing into darkness. Rivera's voice came over comms. "Alpha team, confirm formation. Flores Point, Santos rear, let's move." They advanced carefully, each step deliberate. The sound of boots on gravel echoed faintly, carried by the wind. Josie's night vision painted the world in eerie shades of green. She could see everything and nothing, shapes without texture, shadows without warmth. Her earpiece crackled softly. Tech to all stations, picking up weak transmissions ahead, encrypted chatter, probably insurgent patrols. "Distance?" Rivera asked. "Hard to tell, maybe 1 click east, could be static reflection." "Stay sharp," Rivera said. "We're deep in their backyard." They moved for hours through silence, the kind that pressed against your skull until even breathing felt loud. Then faintly a sound. A voice carried by the wind, laughter, male, then another closer. Josie froze, raised a fist. Everyone stopped instantly. She crouched, peering through her scope. 2 insurgents, barely visible under moonlight, standing near a makeshift outpost. A single lantern, a rusted truck half buried in dirt, and a radio antenna. "Two tangos," she whispered. "Possible comms relay." "Take them quiet," Rivera said. She nodded once. Moving low, she ghosted through the darkness, heart steady, breath shallow. The ground crunched faintly under her boots, each sound amplified in her ears. The closer she got, the clearer their voices became, casual, careless, completely unaware of the storm approaching. She was 15 meters away when one of them turned slightly, frowning at something, maybe a shadow, maybe nothing. Too late. Her blade flashed once in the dark. The first man dropped silently. The second turned, mouth open to shout, her hand clamped over it before sound escaped. A quick pull, a soft exhale. Both were still. "Clear," she whispered. Santos joined her, checking the bodies. "Comms gears intact. Tech will want it." They dragged the corpses into the shadows. Lawson crouched beside the transmitter, his fingers flying over the controls. "Encrypted. Looks like a field relay station, might tie into the larger network." "Can we trace it?" Rivera asked. Lawson frowned. "Maybe, but if I start pulling data, it'll ping their system. They'll know someone here." Rivera looked at Josie. "Your call." She hesitated. If they pulled the data, they could expose the network, but it would also blow their cover. A quiet mission could turn into another firefight. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She thought of the last extraction, the bodies, the smoke, the noise. Then she thought of the men funding those guns, of the families who'd never know where their sons disappeared. "Do it," she said. Lawson nodded. "Copy that." He plugged a cable into the unit. Lights blinked red, then green. For 20 seconds, nothing happened. Then the transmitter began to whine, a high-pitched tone that made Josie's stomach twist. "Signal spike," Lawson said. "They know." Rivera's jaw tightened. "Move now." They were already running when the first shot cracked through the night. The first bullet snapped past her ear like an angry wasp. Josie dove behind a boulder, gravel exploding where she'd stood a heartbeat before. The mountain air filled with gunfire, sharp, echoing, multiplied by stone until it sounded like the world was breaking apart. "Contact east," Rivera shouted. Santos was already firing, short bursts, measured. Lawson yanked his cable from the transmitter, shoving the device into his pack. "They were waiting for us." "Doesn't matter," Rivera growled. "We move downhill, Flores lead." Josie leaned out, fired twice, then ducked back as rounds sparked against the rock. Her breath came fast but controlled, the rhythm she'd learned in firefights long ago: inhale, squeeze, exhale, shift. She felt the recoil in her bones, the way every shot anchored her in reality. "Two patrols closing in from northeast," Santos called. They were surrounded. "Smoke out," Rivera barked. Lawson tossed a grenade. Thick gray plumes poured upward, swallowing the lantern light and painting the ridge in ghostly haze. Josie moved first, sprinting through the smoke, boots slipping on loose rock. The drop ahead was steep, a zigzag trail carved into the cliffside. Below, darkness. No good options. "Go," Rivera shouted. "We'll cover." Josie went over the edge, sliding down the slope, gravel scraping her gloves. Her boots hit a ledge 10 meters lower. The others followed, one after another, shadows in smoke. The air smelled of burnt powder and ozone. Her ears rang from the gunfire echoing off stone walls. "Lawson, any chance of jamming their comms?" she asked. He was panting, sweat streaking down his dust-covered face. "Negative. They're using short-range bursts. We're blind." The sound of shouting climbed closer, foreign voices, confident, coordinated. Rivera pointed west. "Cave entrance, go." Josie spotted it, a narrow opening hidden behind brush and rock. She darted toward it, dropping to one knee as more rounds sliced past. They slipped inside one by one. The darkness swallowed them. The gunfire outside dimmed but didn't stop. Inside the cave, it was cold, silent except for the drip of water. Light discipline, Rivera ordered. NVGs only. Green shadows bloomed across Josie's vision. The cave stretched deeper, winding into the mountain like a throat. The air was heavy with damp stone and something older, the smell of time. They moved cautiously, weapons up, footsteps muffled. Lawson whispered, "We can hole up here, buy time for extraction." "Negative," Rivera said. "Too exposed. If they have dogs or drones, they'll find the entrance." "Then what?" Santos asked. Rivera scanned the tunnel ahead. "We keep moving. If this connects through the ridge, we can circle around and lose them." No one argued. They moved deeper, the walls narrowing until they had to walk single file. The ceiling dripped water that hissed softly as it hit the barrels of their rifles. Josie felt the claustrophobia creeping in, the air getting thinner, her breathing louder in her helmet. She'd always hated enclosed spaces. The jungle was alive and hostile, but it breathed with you. This place felt like the earth itself wanted them gone. She pushed the thought down, focus. After 20 minutes, the tunnel widened into a small chamber. "Hold," Rivera said. They crouched among the rocks, catching their breath. Josie could still hear faint gunfire echoing outside the cave, distant now, like thunder rolling away. Santos pulled a water pouch from her vest, handed it to Josie. "You good?" Josie nodded, drank, then wiped her mouth. "We can't stay long." Rivera crouched by the wall, tracing his gloved hand along the stone. "Feels like airflow from the left passage. Could lead outside." Lawson checked his GPS. "We've lost satellite lock. No comms, no navigation." "Then we trust instincts," Rivera said. They moved again, left passage, single file. Minutes blurred, the tunnel narrowed, twisted. Once they had to crawl. Josie's knees scraped rock. The sound of her own breathing filled her head, loud and uneven. Her heart pounded too fast. She closed her eyes for half a second, forcing it down. Then a whisper, "Santos ahead, light up ahead." They emerged into a new cavern, larger, open to the sky through a ragged tear in the rock. Moonlight spilled down like cold water, turning everything silver. For a brief moment, it was beautiful. Then she saw the tracks. Boot prints fresh. Rivera crouched. "They've been using this route." "Could be a supply path," Santos said. "Or a trap," Josie murmured. They didn't have time to debate. Voices echoed again, faint but getting closer. Rivera motioned them toward a ledge on the far side. "We climb. Get high ground." They scrambled upward, hands digging into stone, gear clattering softly. The climb wasn't long, but every second felt exposed. Josie reached the top first, pulled herself over the edge and froze. Below her, through a gap in the rocks, she saw movement. Half a dozen insurgents entering the cavern, flashlights slicing through darkness. They moved with purpose, checking corners, scanning the walls. "They're tracking us," Josie whispered into comms. "At least 6, maybe more behind them." Rivera's reply came steady. "We hold position. Silent kills only if they get too close." She steadied her rifle, heart drumming against her ribs. The men below fanned out. One of them knelt, touching the ground, pointing toward the left tunnel the way they'd come. Another looked up, straight toward Josie's ledge. For an instant their eyes met. He shouted something. "Engage," Rivera snapped. The ledge exploded with muzzle flashes. Josie's HK-416 spat flame, rounds echoing through the cavern. The insurgent went down first, then another, but their shouts filled the air, echoing, multiplying. "Contact rear," Santos called. More shadows poured from the tunnel. They were flanked. "Lawson, get us a way out," Rivera barked. "I'm working on it." Josie reloaded last magazine. Her hands were slick with sweat and dust. Her shoulder throbbed with every shot. She took a breath, steadied her scope on a moving silhouette and fired. The man dropped. She shifted left, fired again. Another fell. But for every one that dropped, more filled the gaps. Grenade! She saw it roll across the rock below, small, dark, spinning. Down, she shouted. The explosion threw dust and stone into the air. The shockwave knocked her sideways. She hit the ground hard, the edge of the ledge biting into her ribs. Her vision blurred, ears ringing. When the noise cleared, she heard Rivera shouting faint, distant, "Flores, status." She coughed, "I'm up. Move right flank, cover Doc." Williams was dragging Santos, whose leg was bleeding heavily. Shrapnel. Josie fired to cover them, bullets sparking against stone. Lawson yelled from the back, "Found something. Narrow shaft might lead out." Rivera didn't hesitate. "Go one by one, Doc first." Williams half-carried Santos toward the hole, a jagged vertical crack barely wide enough for a human body. "Flores, you're next," Rivera ordered. She hesitated, glancing at him. "You first, sir." "Not this time." She nodded once. No arguments, just trust. She slung her rifle, crawled into the narrow opening. The rock was cold, scraping her shoulders as she descended. Her boots found purchase on rough stone. She lowered herself slowly, breath echoing. Below her, Doc called, "We're clear. Drop the last meter." She let go, landing hard beside him. The chamber below was tiny but open to the outside through a crack in the rock face. Beyond, darkness and wind. Lawson followed, then Rivera last. Gunfire still echoed above, fatting as they moved deeper into the new tunnel. They emerged onto a steep mountainside overlooking a valley filled with mist. The stars above were sharp, cold points of light. For the first time in hours, the air tasted clean. They crouched in the shadows, catching their breath. Santos was pale, blood seeping through a bandage on her thigh. Williams worked quickly, applying pressure. "We need a vac now," he said. "She's losing too much." Lawson checked his tablet. Still no signal. "We're completely blacked out." Rivera looked at Josie. "Options." She scanned the terrain, sheer cliffs, thick forest below, faint lights miles away. "We move west, stay low. There's a river down there. Follow it to lower ground. Maybe we'll regain comms." "Then we move," Rivera said. They started down the slope, slow, careful. Rocks slid underfoot, sending small avalanches down into the valley. Every sound felt too loud. Josie stayed at the front, scanning with her scope. Every few minutes she caught glimmers of movement far above flashlights, search parties sweeping the ridge. They weren't giving up. Santos stumbled once. Josie caught her arm, steadying her. "I've got you." Santos tried to smile. "You always do." They kept moving. After what felt like hours, they reached a narrow stream cutting through the valley floor. The moonlight turned the water to liquid glass. Lawson finally got a faint ping on his tablet. "Signal's intermittent. I might reach command if I boost the antenna." "Do it," Rivera said. He unpacked a collapsible antenna, raising it as high as he could. Static hissed through the headset, then a voice. "This is command. Identify." Lawson nearly laughed. "This is Alpha Team. Requesting emergency extract, grid reference Sierra 417. One wounded, low on ammo, enemy in pursuit." The line crackled. "Copy that, Alpha. Extraction window at 4:30. Nearest LZ is 3 clicks southwest. Can you move?" Rivera looked at Santos, pale, sweating. "We'll move." He cut the comms and turned to the team. "We've got 4 hours to cover 3 clicks through enemy territory. Let's go." No one complained. They followed the river, moving through fog that clung to the trees. The world was quiet again, the kind of silence that comes after too much noise, fragile, temporary. Josie's thoughts drifted as she walked. The weight of the rifle, the pulse in her shoulder, the faces of the dead. War wasn't what people thought. It wasn't glory. It wasn't courage. It was the space between breaths, the decision to keep moving when everything in you screamed to stop. She glanced back at Santos, limping but steady, refusing help now. Williams walked beside her, hand hovering close. Josie realized how much she admired that, the stubbornness to keep walking, even bleeding. They reached a clearing where the river bent sharply west. The valley opened beneath them, filled with low mist and faint starlight. Rivera signaled a halt. "We rest here 10 minutes. Josie knelt near the water, washing blood from her hands. The cold bit her skin, grounding her. Lawson sat beside her. "You ever think we'll get out of this one?" She stared at the reflection in the water, her face, pale and hard under the moonlight. "We always do," she said. He laughed softly. "That's not an answer." "No," she admitted, "but it's enough." Above them thunder rumbled again, distant but growing. Another storm was coming. Josie looked toward the horizon, where dark clouds crawled over the mountains like smoke. She took a slow breath. "We move before the rain." Rivera nodded. "Then let's disappear." And under the weight of the coming storm, they did, 5 shadows slipping back into the darkness, walking toward another fight none of them had chosen, but all of them understood. The first raindrops came like whispers, soft, scattered, harmless. Then the sky opened. Rain poured in sheets, hammering the jungle until the sound became a constant roar. The mist thickened, swallowing everything beyond 20 meters. The moon vanished. The world turned gray, heavy, and blind. Josie adjusted her hood and wiped water from her optic. The droplets returned immediately. The jungle wasn't just wet. It was alive, every leaf dripping, every breath filled with the taste of mud and rot. "Visibility's gone," Santos muttered, limping behind her. "Feels like walking through soup." "Keep your spacing," Rivera said over comms. "Noise discipline, we're close." Close. 3 clicks to extraction, maybe less if they cut straight through the ravine. But the rain had turned trails into rivers, slopes into traps. The path ahead was steep and narrow, lined with roots that shifted underfoot. Josie led, 1 step at a time, scanning through her NVGs. The green glow painted everything ghostly, surreal, a different kind of nightmare. Every few seconds, thunder rolled across the valley, deep and distant. The air smelled of ozone and wet metal. "Tech," Rivera said quietly. "Confirm signal on the LZ." Lawson tapped his receiver. "Intermittent, storms killing transmission. Best guess the bird's still en route." ETA. 45 minutes, give or take. Josie exhaled slowly. 45 minutes might as well be forever in weather like this. The mud sucked at her boots with every step. Her shoulder burned. Her body was screaming for rest, but her mind refused to listen. She glanced back. Williams was helping Santos over a slick boulder, both of them soaked and pale. Rivera brought up the rear, rifle at the ready despite the rain. They were ghosts moving through a drowning world. At a small clearing, Rivera raised his fist. "Hold." They crouched under the partial cover of a fallen tree. Water cascaded off the trunk in steady streams. Josie pressed her back to the bark, trying to steady her breathing. The rain blurred everything, even thought. Williams crouched beside Santos, checking her wound again. The bleeding had slowed, but her face was gray. "She needs real med support soon," he said. Rivera nodded. "She'll get it." Santos smirked faintly. "Don't sound so confident, Sergeant." He met her gaze. "I only sound confident when I have to lie." Even through exhaustion, they managed a quiet laugh, brief, hollow, but real. Josie found herself staring at the water dripping from her glove. It reminded her of blood, endless, untraceable. She thought of the men they'd killed in the cave, of Kramer's quiet face on the stretcher, of the question that kept circling back. Why? She knew the tactical reasons, the orders, the missions, but underneath it all there was something smaller, more human, a need to protect, to balance the scales no one else could see. Sometimes she wondered if that was courage or guilt. "Movement," Lawson whispered. Instantly, every weapon came up. He pointed across the clearing. Through the curtain of rain, faint figures moved, 6, maybe more, 2 coordinated for civilians. "Insurgents," Josie said softly. "They're tracking us." "Do we engage?" Santos asked. Rivera shook his head. "Negative. We keep moving, avoid contact. We can't afford another firefight." They slipped out of the clearing, moving downhill, staying in shadow. The enemy patrol's voices grew faint behind them, then vanished under the rain. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. The storm had erased time. Then Josie heard it, a sound that didn't belong. A cry. Faint human. She stopped, raised her hand. "Did you hear that?" The others froze. For a few seconds there was only rain. Then again a voice, weak, broken, somewhere off the trail. Rivera frowned. Direction. Josie turned her head, listening. West, maybe 50 meters. Williams adjusted his headset. Could be wounded, could be a trap. Josie hesitated. Every instinct screamed to stay focused on extraction, stay alive, get her people out. But the sound came again, a plea in a language she barely understood, but the tone was universal. Fear. Rivera caught her eye. "Your call." She looked toward the darkness. "We check it quietly." They moved off the trail, following the sound. The ground turned uneven, the mud slicker. Branches clawed at her sleeves. Then she saw it, a small figure collapse beside a tree. A boy, maybe 12. Clothes torn, barefoot, shivering violently. His leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. Williams moved first, kneeling beside him. Broken tibia, maybe more. The boy looked up, wide eyes full of panic and pain. He said something in his language, too fast to understand. Santos knelt beside Williams, grimacing. "Locals live miles from here. What's he doing alone?" Rivera scanned the area. Orphan, lost during fighting. Josie felt something twist in her chest. The boy reached out, grabbing her sleeve, whispering something again and again. Lawson translated softly. "He's saying, 'My father will come.'" Rivera exhaled. "We can't stay, extraction in 30 minutes. Williams glared up at him. "We're not leaving him." "Doc." "I said we're not leaving him." The rain filled the silence that followed. Rivera looked at Josie. His expression wasn't command, it was burden. "You decide." She stared at the boy. He couldn't have weighed more than 60 pounds, skin and bones shaking. Her mind split in two. Mission first. No attachments. Every second here risks the team. But another voice, quieter, older, whispered from somewhere deep inside her. "If you walk away, you'll carry him forever." She sighed, heavy and tired. "We take him." Williams didn't smile, but his shoulders eased. "I'll stabilize him, splint and wrap." Rivera didn't argue, he just nodded once. "Make it fast." They moved again within minutes. Williams carrying the boy in a makeshift sling, Santos hobbling beside him. The rain began to thin, but the fog thickened. Lightning flickered through the clouds above, revealing the outline of the valley ahead. Lawson checked his receiver. Signals stronger, extraction, near that clearing downriver. "Then that's where we go," Rivera said. They reached the clearing 20 minutes later. A flat patch of grass bordered by jagged trees, river winding just beyond. Josie crouched behind a fallen trunk, scanning the perimeter through her scope. Clear for now. Williams set the boy down gently under a tarp. The child's breathing was shallow but steady. His eyes flickered open briefly, scared but trusting. Josie knelt beside him, brushing mud from his forehead. He stared at her, a stranger in a helmet, face streaked with dirt and rain, and whispered something faint. Lawson translated again. He says, "Thank you, sister." Something in her chest cracked, something she hadn't realized was still breakable. Rivera's voice came through comms. "Bird inbound, 2 minutes." The sound arrived seconds later, faint at first, then louder, until the air trembled again. The helicopter appeared through the clouds, lights flashing in the mist. Pop smoke, Rivera ordered. Lawson tossed a green canister into the open. It hissed, releasing a plume that swirled in the rain. The Blackhawk descended, skids hovering inches above the grass. Josie motioned Williams forward. Go. He lifted the boy, shielding him from the rotor wash. Santos followed, limping, arm around Lawson's shoulder. Josie and Rivera stayed back, scanning the tree line. Then gunfire. Contact north. Muzzle flashes lit up the fog. Rounds tore through branches. The door gunner opened up, bullets shredding the tree line. Josie dropped to one knee, returning fire. Her rounds cracked through the mist, finding shapes she could barely see. Rivera shouted over the comms, "Get the wounded aboard." "Already on," Williams replied. "Then go." Josie fired until her last magazine went empty, then sprinted for the helicopter. Rivera was right behind her, firing controlled bursts as he moved. They dove through the open door. The crew chief yanked it shut. "Lift, lift." The helicopter surged upward, nose tilting. The ground fell away. The jungle disappeared under cloud and shadow. Josie leaned against the metal wall, chest heaving. She looked across the cabin. The boy was wrapped in a blanket, Williams checking his pulse. Santos sat beside them, eyes half closed. Rivera sat across from her, rifle still in hand, gaze fixed on nothing. Outside, lightning illuminated the clouds in blinding flashes. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Rivera said quietly, "You broke protocol." Josie met his eyes. "I know." "You jeopardized the mission." She nodded. "I know that too." He studied her for a long time, then looked at the boy sleeping against Doc's shoulder. "Good call." Josie exhaled slowly. The tension drained from her shoulders. Williams smiled faintly without looking up. "We don't get many good calls out here." Rivera leaned his head back against the bulkhead, eyes closing briefly. "Maybe that's what makes them count." The helicopter flew on through the storm, engine steady, slicing through the gray. Josie stared out the small window. The clouds below looked endless, like an ocean they'd never reach the bottom of. Her reflection in the glass was pale, eyes hollow but alive. In the faint hum of the rotors, she thought of something her father used to tell her back before she wore a uniform, before she learned what duty cost. Courage isn't about what you fight for. It's about what you refuse to leave behind. She smiled barely. Sometimes the mission wasn't written in orders. Sometimes it was written in moments like this. A child saved in the rain, a decision that would never make a report but would live in memory. As the Blackhawk carried them toward the faint lights of base, Josie closed her eyes. Not in exhaustion this time. In peace. For the first time in years, she felt something that wasn't fear or adrenaline. She felt right. The hangar lights burned too bright. After hours of darkness and rain, the harsh fluorescence stabbed at Josie's eyes as the helicopter's rotors slowed to silence. The sudden stillness felt unnatural, like the world had been cut in half. Medics rushed in first, lifting Santos and the boy onto stretchers. Williams followed, still clutching his field kit, hands shaking. Rivera stayed seated a moment longer, staring at the deck as if it still moved beneath him. Josie stepped out last. Her boots hit the wet concrete with a hollow slap. The storm had followed them home, low clouds crawling over the base, rain still misting down, the air heavy with jet fuel and mud. She watched the medics disappear into the hospital tent, the boy's small hand hanging limp over the side of the stretcher. He hadn't woken once during the flight. Something inside her stayed tethered to that image, refusing to let go. Rivera came up beside her, eyes tired but steady. "Get cleaned up, debrief in 30. She nodded. He hesitated, then added, "You did good out there." It should have felt like praise. It didn't. The shower was scalding, but she couldn't get warm. Water streamed down, pink for a moment as dust and blood washed away. She pressed her palms to the tile and let her forehead rest against the wall, breathing slow. Every mission left something behind, sometimes a scar, sometimes a sound, sometimes a face. Tonight it was all three. She thought of the cave, the men she'd killed, the grenade blast, the boy's whisper. Each memory flickered behind her eyelids like film reels no one asked to watch. She turned off the water. The silence was worse. The command tent smelled of wet maps and coffee gone cold. Rivera sat at the head of the table, sleeves rolled, expression unreadable. Lawson typed quietly beside him, logging data from the recovered transmitter. Williams leaned back, eyes red. Santos was absent, still in surgery. Josie entered quietly, dropped her damp jacket over the back of a chair and sat. Rivera didn't look up. You all know the drill, start with after the cave. Lawson recited coordinates, contacts, timelines, his voice mechanical, efficient. Rivera interrupted occasionally for clarifications. Williams filled in medical details. When they reached the part about the boy, the tent went silent. Rivera finally looked up. That deviation from mission protocol, I'll log it as a tactical necessity. Lawson frowned. That's not what it was. Rivera's gaze sharpened. You have a problem with that. Lawson shook his head quickly. No, sir, just saying it was human. Rivera's eyes softened almost imperceptibly. That's rarer than tactical these days. He turned to Josie. You made the call, you stand by it. She met his gaze. Yes. Even if it compromised mission integrity. It didn't, we all made it back. That's luck. Maybe, she said quietly. But if we'd left him, that wouldn't have been luck. That would have been a choice. The words hung there, soft but heavy. Rivera leaned back, studying her. Then he nodded slowly. Fair enough. He turned to Lawson. What about the data from the transmitter? Still decrypting, Lawson said. But initial fragments mention multiple funding streams, cross-border arms transfers, offshore accounts. Names are blurred but high-level. Rivera rubbed his jaw. So it was worth the blood. No one answered. The debrief dragged another hour. Coordinates, logistics, call signs, all the language that turned chaos into paperwork. By the end, everyone looked half dead. Rivera closed the folder. We'll stand down for 72 hours. Medical and psych evals mandatory. Williams groaned. Psych evals again. Rivera gave him a look. That's an order. Josie almost smiled. The idea of anyone evaluating what went on inside her head was laughable. There wasn't a checklist for what she carried. As the others filed out, Rivera called her back. Flores. She stopped at the flap. Sir. You did good, he said again, quieter this time. Don't let anyone make you doubt it. She nodded, but the weight in her chest didn't lift. Outside, dawn was breaking, a thin pink light threading through clouds. The storm had finally passed, leaving puddles that reflected the sky. Josie walked toward the hospital tent. Inside, everything smelled of antiseptic and damp fabric. Machines beeped softly, a fragile rhythm of survival. Santos lay on a cot, leg bandaged, eyes half open. She smiled when she saw Josie. You look worse than me. Josie sat beside her. You scared the hell out of us. Santos shrugged weakly. That's my job. They sat in silence for a while, the quiet between soldiers who didn't need words. Finally, Santos said, the kid's alive. They said they're transferring him to the NGO camp near Jalalabad. Josie looked up. He'll make it. Looks that way. Relief came like an ache, deep and slow. Santos studied her face. You're not okay, are you? Josie almost laughed. What does okay even mean anymore? Means you're still here, Santos said, and that counts for something. Josie nodded, eyes distant. You ever think about what we become after all this? Santos closed her eyes. Yeah, all the time, but maybe we're not supposed to know yet. Josie sat with that for a while, listening to the rainwater drip from the canvas roof. Later that afternoon, the base returned to its rhythm, rotors spinning, trucks moving, voices shouting orders. The war didn't pause for reflection. It never had. Josie sat outside the barracks, rifle disassembled across her lap. The ritual of cleaning it was calming, pieces and purpose, order carved from chaos. Lawson joined her, holding 2 cups of instant coffee, peace offering. She took one, for what? For being right about the kid. She sipped, it was bitter, terrible, but warm. Don't say that too loud. Rivera might start expecting morality from us. Lawson grinned faintly. He already does, he just hides it better. They sat in silence, watching the sunset bleed across the horizon. After a long time, Lawson said, "You think it matters, what we do out there?" Josie turned the bolt carrier in her hands, watching the light slide across it. "I used to think it did. And now I think it matters to the ones we save, even if no one remembers our names." Lawson nodded slowly. "That's enough, I guess." "Sometimes," she said. They finished their coffee in silence, the air cooling, the sky deepening into violet. That night she couldn't sleep. The base was quiet except for the distant hum of generators and the occasional bark of orders. She lay staring at the ceiling, the boy's voice replaying in her mind, "Thank you, sister." It wasn't just gratitude, it was something else. Recognition, maybe, a reminder that beneath the uniform and armor she was still human. At 200 she gave up trying to rest. She got dressed and walked outside. The night air was crisp, almost clean. The storm had scrubbed the world raw. Stars glittered above, sharp and cold. She wandered to the edge of the airfield, where the runway lights stretched in a straight line toward the horizon. Rivera was there, sitting on a fuel drum, smoking quietly. He didn't look surprised to see her, couldn't sleep. She shook her head. He gestured with the cigarette. "You ever think about how small all this looks from up there? Every time we fly." He nodded. "Makes you wonder why we fight so hard to hold it." Josie folded her arms, "Because someone has to." He glanced at her, smoke curling from his lips. "That's what I used to tell myself too." "What changed?" He smiled faintly, sad. "Lost count of how many times I said it." They stood in silence for a while. The wind moved gently across the tarmac, carrying the faint smell of oil and rain. Finally, Rivera said, "You did something right out there, Flores. Not just tactically, humanly. That boy, he'll grow up remembering a soldier didn't leave him behind. That's the kind of story that outlives missions." She looked at him. "You think stories matter?" He dropped the cigarette, crushed it under his boot. "They're all that ever does." He walked away, leaving her alone with the hum of the bass and the endless night. Hours later, as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Josie stood by the fence, watching a transport plane lift into the sky. She didn't know if the boy was on it. She hoped so. The engines roared, and for a brief second, the rising sun flashed across the fuselage, a streak of gold cutting through gray. She closed her eyes and breathed in the sound, the warmth, the memory. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, another mission, another fight, another loss. But for now, in this fleeting moment, she felt something close to peace. The kind that doesn't come from victory or survival, but from knowing that when it mattered most, she chose compassion over command. Sometimes that's all a soldier can do. Sometimes that's all a person should. The desert always went quiet after sunrise. Not silent, just quiet. The kind of stillness that hummed beneath everything. The wind shifted over sand and steel, carrying heat that hadn't yet arrived. The war felt far away in those early hours. Sometimes, if she stood still long enough, Josie could almost believe it was over. 3 days had passed since the mountain extraction. The boy was gone, airlifted to the NGO camp as planned. Santos was recovering, legs stitched and splinted, restless but alive. Lawson and Williams had been reassigned to logistics for a week. Rivera spent most of his time behind closed doors, buried in after-action reports and encrypted calls. And Josie, she was adrift. Not broken, not numb, just somewhere between. The human body heals faster than the human mind, she thought. Her shoulder wound was already closing, the bruise on her ribs fatting, but the ache inside, the quiet unease that came with memory that never healed, only learned to whisper. She walked toward the airstrip, coffee cup in hand, watching a new unit load gear into a transport plane. Fresh faces, clean uniforms. They looked the way she used to, eager, certain, untouched. It wasn't envy she felt. It was something closer to grief for them, for who she'd once been. Rivera found her there, as always, standing alone by the fence. "Morning," he said. She nodded. "You heading out?" He shook his head. "Command wants me here until the debrief's fully cleared. They're asking questions about the transmitter data. It's bigger than we thought." She half smiled. "You've been saying that a lot lately." He returned the smile, tired but genuine. "I think it's always bigger than we think." They stood in silence for a while, watching the new arrivals load up. Rivera broke the quiet first. "They're calling it a successful mission." Josie looked at him. "Based on what?" "Intel recovered, 0 casualties. Target confirmed neutralized, 1 civilian rescued." "Success," she echoed softly. He heard the tone in her voice. "Doesn't sound like victory to you." Josie stared at the horizon. "I used to think success meant getting everyone home. Then I learned sometimes it means just coming back yourself." "And now?" She thought about it, the boy's small hand gripping her sleeve. The rain, the fear, the relief. "Now," she said finally, "I think success is about not losing the part of yourself that still cares." Rivera nodded slowly. "That's rarer than medals." She smiled faintly. "Medals don't stop the dreams." He didn't argue. They'd both lived long enough to know that. Later that morning, Josie sat in the infirmary beside Santos, who was propped up reading an old paperback. "Since when do you read romance novels?" Josie teased. Santos grinned weakly. "Since I realized everyone else in here is talking about pain meds and infections. Needed some variety." Josie laughed softly. "Fair enough." Santos closed the book and looked at her friend. "So, what happens to us now?" "Rivera says we'll be on hold until the intel's processed. After that, probably another op." Santos sighed. "You ever get tired of being temporary?" Josie looked down. "All the time." They sat quietly, the faint beep of heart monitors filling the air. After a moment, Santos said, "You know that kid, the one we pulled out, he asked for you." Josie blinked. "He's awake." Santos nodded. "NGO radioed in last night. He's stable. Broken leg, some dehydration, but alive. Said he wants to know when the soldier with the soft eyes is coming back." Josie almost laughed, almost cried. "Soft eyes," she repeated, shaking her head. "He must have been delirious." Santos smiled. "Or maybe he saw something you forgot you still had." Josie didn't answer. She didn't need to. That night the base was alive with noise, rotors, engines, voices. A convoy had arrived from the capital, carrying supplies and new orders. The war machine never slept. Josie sat outside the barracks again, the same spot she always found when the world got too loud. The stars were hazy tonight, hidden behind the thin veil of dust. Lawson joined her, holding a small radio. "They just aired something on the NGO channel," he said, turning the dial until static gave way to a voice. "A young boy rescued from the mountains earlier this week was safely reunited with his relatives today. The child, who survived several days alone during heavy storms, was found by a coalition patrol during an ongoing operation. Aid workers describe his recovery as miraculous." When asked about the soldiers who saved him, he said only this: they came like ghosts, but one of them smiled. The radio crackled, then fell silent. Josie stared at it for a long time, the sound of the reporter's voice still hanging in the air. Lawson said softly, "Guess that's you." She didn't answer, her throat was tight. He placed the radio down beside her. "You'll never meet him again, you know." "I know, but he'll remember you." She looked at him, eyes glistening under the dim light. "Then maybe that's enough." He nodded, then left her alone. Josie leaned back, staring at the horizon where darkness met the faint glow of the airfield lights. The sound of engines faded, replaced by the whisper of wind. The following morning, Rivera called her into the briefing room. A single folder sat on the table. "Transfer orders," he said. "You're being reassigned." She blinked. "Reassigned?" He nodded. "High Command wants you stateside for advanced instruction duty, training new recruits." She frowned. "That's a desk job." "Not entirely. Instructor rotation, airborne prep and mission simulation. You'll still jump, just in different ways." Josie looked down at the folder. "They're pulling me off the line." Rivera's tone softened. "They're giving you a break, you've done your part." She didn't know whether to feel relief or loss, maybe both. Rivera studied her face. "You earned this, Flores. Don't mistake survival for exile." She smiled faintly. "You always this poetic, sir." He grinned. "Only when I mean it." He slid the folder toward her. "You fly out tomorrow morning." Josie took it, nodded once, then saluted. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For not making me choose between orders and my conscience." He met her eyes. "That's what command is supposed to mean." The air was cold again at dawn. She stood by the transport ramp, duffel slung over her shoulder, watching the horizon turn from violet to gold. Rivera and Santos stood beside her. Lawson and Williams were already loading equipment nearby. "Try not to corrupt too many recruits," Santos joked. Josie smirked. "No promises." Rivera extended his hand. "You'll make a damn good teacher, Flores." She shook it. "Only because I had a damn good leader." He gave a small nod, the kind that said more than words ever could. As the engines roared to life, Josie turned for one last look. The base stretched out behind her, the tents, the hangars, the endless desert. It wasn't home, but it was the only place that had ever understood her. She climbed aboard. Inside, the noise settled into a steady rhythm. She found a seat by the window and watched as the ground began to move beneath them. The helicopter lifted slowly, rising above the base, above the dust, above the noise. The view expanded, the barren landscape stretching endlessly, scars of roads and rivers winding through nothingness. From up here, everything looked small again. She rested her head against the cold window, eyes half closed. The sound of the rotors blurred into a low hum. Her thoughts drifted to the boy, to Santos, to Rivera, to every face that had come and gone, to the moments that defined her, even when she didn't realize they would. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was running from something. She was heading toward something new. Maybe peace, maybe purpose, maybe just a quieter kind of war, the one inside, the one that never really ended. She smiled softly, eyes on the endless sky. Because in the end, that's what it was all for, not medals, not missions, not even survival. It was for the simple act of staying human in a world that kept trying to take that away. The sun broke fully over the horizon, flooding the cabin in light. Josie closed her eyes, the warmth washing over her face. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the scars and silence, she felt it, not triumph, not relief, but grace. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.